All right, welcome back to Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. We do this every Wednesday. We call it the Big Interview, and I'm really excited about today's guest because I've known him for a long, long time. Dave Lapham. You listen to him for over 30 years on the Bengals broadcast. He's also done stuff for Fox on coverage of the Big 12 Conference. He's even done the NBC NFL on NBC, going back a number of years. He was born in June of 1952 in Massachusetts. It's hard to believe that makes him 70 years young. I just cannot believe it. He grew up in a town called Wakefield, Massachusetts, then went to Syracuse, and was in the famed Newhouse School of Communications there. All-conference performer, team captain for the Orangemen. Third-round pick in 1974 of the Bengals. Played for 11 years. And we're going to ask him about this 10-year personal services contract he signed with Donald Trump, then the owner of the New Jersey Generals of the USFL. Dave Lapham, before we get to all of that, I hope you're doing great today. We thank you sincerely so much for your time. What was life like? I always love asking every guest we have. What was your childhood like growing up in Massachusetts?
It was great. And first of all, thanks for the opportunity to visit with you, Thom. You're a great one. No question about it. It was had an unbelievable sports life, growing up as a young kid. As the season changed, that was my favorite sport, whatever the sport was in that particular season. And it's kind of funny because my dad was a 5 foot, maybe 11 inch, maybe 185 pound artist, and technically illustrated by trade. Never played a sport in his life. Didn't know if a ball was stuffed or had air in it. And my mom was about 6 feet tall, like in the 6th grade. She was taller than her male teacher. So she had 3 sons. All of the sons went to her side genetically, and all 3 got college scholarships, 2 for football, 1 for basketball. And my dad's like, what the heck is going on? Because, he when he went to the games, he really didn't understand what was going on all that much. But we all played sports. We all loved sports. And that was a big, big part of our upbringing, just pickup games, whatever it was. In the neighborhood, we lived in a neighborhood where there were a ton of kids, and a bunch of kids around the same age, like within a 3-year age span where, we had enough kids to play 9-on-9 baseball, 11-on-11 football. So we had a lot of fun growing up, and it was very, very sports-centric for sure.
When you were coming out of high school, were you one of those guys that was a heavily recruited guy, or were you a guy that maybe was a little bit off the radar from some of the quote-unquote big boys?
I think I was probably in the middle. I mean, I don't think I was like on everybody's list, to as far as a blue chip recruit or whatever. But got recruited by a couple of schools, out in that era, the Pac-10, the Big Ten, the ACC, and then schools in the East. Being from the East, Penn State, Syracuse, Boston College, schools like that. I was always big. I mean, when I was a freshman, I was 6 feet, couple hundred pounds as a freshman, grew to like 6'3", 250 as a sophomore. And then when I graduated, I was like 6'4", 275.
Wow.
But I would get up to like, in the 260s or whatever for football, and then lose weight for basketball. Basketball was my favorite sport.
Mm-hmm.
I got some all-league honors as a basketball player. I thought I was going to be the next Wayne Embry. In fact, Wayne Embry is the one that recruited me to try to go to Miami of Ohio. That's where he went, and I met him at a basketball camp. And so he said, you could play football and basketball at Miami. They'd probably let you play both sports. But the story on Wayne Embry was I was a sophomore in high school, and like I said, I was already like 6'3", about 250. So I'm at this I went to a basketball camp every summer because there were no football camps back then, no contact camps, not even any football special skills camps or whatever. So I'd go to basketball camp every summer and try to improve as a basketball player and, play very competitive people in these camps and hold my own a little bit. So Wayne Embry's at a camp, and he's giving a lecture on offensive rebounding. And it's a hot day, man. And he's got the goatee and the sweat's just coming like a faucet at the end of his beard, and just dripping. and he calls a person out of the crowd of campers to be the guy that's going to box him out. So he picks me, and I go over to to do this little demonstration with Wayne Embry, and I'm thinking, wow, this is the biggest human being I've ever seen. So the first, they take a shot, and I didn't really box him out, but the ball ended up in my hands, and the camp erupts, and he's embarrassed. Embry's now he's pissed, and he goes, we're doing this again. I'm telling you what, man. The ball goes up. I go to box him out. He runs me over. The first thing that hit was my chin on the asphalt, and then my hands cut my chin, scraped my hands up. I mean, he just flattened me, man. And then he helps me up. He goes, man, hey, I'm sorry, young man. He says, I overdid it there a little bit. I said, I've never felt anything like that. That felt like a tidal wave. I can't believe how strong you are. He goes, well, you'll see when you go to college next year. I said, I'm not going to college next year. He goes, you're not? I said, no. He said, how old are you? I said, I'm 15. I'm a sophomore at Wakefield High School. He goes, oh, my God. He goes, I'm really sorry, young man.
That's
crazy.
A great story.
It was crazy.
You end up going to Syracuse, and I got to tell you, and shame on me, as I'm getting prepared for this interview, and I'm reading about a guy named Ben Schwartzwalder.
Yes.
He was a head coach at Syracuse, 24
right.
years, won a national championship there. He coached names like Jim Brown, Ernie Davis, Floyd Little, Larry Zonka. He was running a big-time program there at Syracuse. I mean, for the younger generation out there right now, they've had their ups and downs through the years, and Dick McPherson and on and on and on and on. But what was it about this guy that made you want to go play for him?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I got recruited by the running back coach, by the gentleman by the name of Jim Shreve, who was very businesslike, very professional. He came to the house in a suit, and he had on a hat with a feather. It was like a business deal for him. And he impressed the heck out of my parents. So I guess that was a big plus for him. And I really liked him as well. Scheduled a visit. And like you said, I started walking through, the place, the athletic, and it's been obviously built up, and Carrier Dome wasn't there. I played at old Archbold Stadium, which was a pit, really. It was a concrete seats. There were no backs to the seats. It was just all a concrete stadium. They tore that down and put up in the Carrier Dome, but they had all the memorabilia in the athletic building of these great players, these great running backs, and there were some really good linemen as well, All-American linemen, that played in the National Football League. And I'm looking at the history and tradition. They won the national championship in 1959, and that was before Jim Brown even got there. And Ernie Davis, of course, was a Heisman Trophy winner, died of leukemia after he was drafted in the first round by the Cleveland Browns. And there's been, movies and books written about Ernie Davis and his life. He was president of the student body as well as a Heisman Trophy winner at Syracuse. You talk about a guy that was the All-American guy. So I start, looking at all this information, and I'm thinking, man, this is a pretty good situation here potentially. The other thing I liked about it, Thom, was they were independent, and teams could be independent back then and not be affiliated with the conference. And so I thought, I get a chance to go play teams in the West Coast, down south. Like we played Miami, Florida. We played University of Washington. We played Big Ten schools. Of course, we played Penn State, Boston College, the schools in the East. We played North Carolina State. So we played, teams in the ACC. So it was like getting a taste of football all over the country a little bit, and kind of opening your eyes to travel in the country a little. And I thought it's just far enough away from home. It was like a 5-hour drive. It was like I wanted to get away, but not where my friends and family couldn't get there. It was like prohibitive to travel there. So it kind of checked a lot of boxes for me. And plus, at the time, I was interested in being a lawyer. And they had, like you said, the Newhouse School is what I ended up getting into after I was there. But initially, I wanted to do law. So it's like pre-law, they had the Maxwell School of Citizenship, which was rated amongst the top in the country, as well as the Newhouse School. And I thought, if I do well in the Maxwell school, I'm going to be able to get into a good law school. And I just found that I was doing fine with it academically. I just didn't like it like I thought I would. It's like, man, this, I don't know. It's not like Perry Mason. You're not going to be, having these trials that are just like you're on the edge of the seat all the time. I'm thinking most of these lawyers, man, it's just a mundane desk job. I'm not into that. So I transferred from the Maxwell school to the Newhouse school. So I got a degree in communications and a minor in political science from some of the courses that I took for the pre-law stuff.
You get drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals, and your first coach is Paul Brown. Look, for the young people out there in this day and age, internet, information readily available just like that. But that was a different time, very different time. How much did you know about Paul Brown going into the Bengals situation after they drafted you? And what did you come to learn right quick about Paul Brown once you got there?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like you talked about Ben Schwartzwalder. He had 24 straight non-losing seasons at Syracuse. 24 straight with all the great recruiting that he did. And he was a powerhouse program in the East at that time. And he and Paul Brown were friendly because, Paul obviously was doing his thing and having tremendous success with the Cleveland Browns and, with the great players that they had in that era. And Ben Schwartzwalder was having his run. And Paul Brown drafted Jim Brown, and he drafted Ernie Davis. He drafted two of Ben Schwartzwalder's running backs, two of the great backs. So they had a lot of communication, over those time frames about those guys as football players and human beings and everything else, the pros and cons of both of them. There weren't any cons to Ernie Davis, but there were some cons to Jim Brown. But they were very, very friendly and very, very respectful of each other's successes and how they garnered those achievements, what they did. They were different in how they did it. I mean, Ben Schwartzwalder was old school. We ran an unbalanced line, and we just ran the football. I never dropped back to pass block until I got to training camp with the Bengals. All we did was run the ball and play action pass. So we just, it was grind it out. It was pound the ball. So, it was that part of football. I got a big taste of it at Syracuse with Ben Schwartzwalder as the head coach. And I was honored to be Ben Schwartzwalder's last captain. He retired from the game right after I got out of Syracuse, and going over to his house and looking at all the things that he had in his house and listening to the stories that he would tell of all of the great players that he coached. That was fascinating. His wife was a hell of a cook too, so I was looking forward to those meals instead of the cafeteria food. But Ben he was a great entertainer. And the first time I'm there, he's like, I'm going to do something. I said, okay, coach. He goes and he gets a shoe shine kit with a little, stand to stick your foot up. He starts shining my shoes. I'm like, coach, I'm not real comfortable with this, And he goes, no, this is what I do. I shine it. He loved shining shoes. I mean, I couldn't believe it. He shined my shoes, boy, like I'd never seen him shine before. It was incredible. But, so that's the experience with him. I get to Cincinnati, and one of the first things, to your point, Paul Brown comes up to me and he said, what was it like playing for Ben? What was Ben like as a football coach? I thought that was really interesting, And then Ben would say, I want to know what Paul Brown's like. I want to know how Paul Brown does things. Will you keep me up to speed about how he handles things? And I mean, it was amazing. And then, right to your point about when did you find out that Paul Brown was a little different and special? Right away. Man, he gets up there to the first meeting. I'm sitting there as my first day at Wilmington College at training camp, and I'm sitting there, and the offensive line has got one area of the classroom, and we're all sitting there, and he just walks in, dressed to a T. I mean, everything's neatly pressed, and he gets up to the podium, and I mean, that room, you could hear a pin drop. I mean, he had the command of that room, and all these big, giant, gargantuan, athletes. And Paul's not a big man of stature, but he carried a big stick, boy, in the game of football. And I knew right then, this is a guy that's in total control. And everything he did was unbelievably organized. Even his first talk to the team was unbelievably organized. And his practices, he was so far ahead of his time, Thom. I mean, he worked us hard, but it was like rapid fire, no wasted time, weren't out there forever, get your work done, get off the football field. Didn't beat us up, back in his era, most of these coaches were Neanderthal in their approach. It's like, we're going to hit you. Man, this is a man's game. If you can't handle this, get out of the game. You're soft or whatever. Paul would do enough hitting that, you knew what you had to do and how you needed to do it, but he didn't beat you up. And he was light years ahead of his time in just about every aspect of football, and then the coaches that he attracted to his staff, like Bill Walsh was the quarterback passing game coach my rookie year. And I'm like, yeah, this guy's he knows what he's doing. I had Bill Tiger Johnson as my line coach, and he ended up being a head coach in the NFL as well. The coaching staff was phenomenal. Everybody wanted to be part of Paul Brown and what Paul Brown was doing, and he was so far ahead of his time in everything that he did, how he structured his offense. He was uniquely special, no doubt about it.
What's a real story, Lap? There have been 1,000 versions of them. I don't even know if you know the real story, but it's been debated. It's been talked about here in Cincinnati. You just mentioned the two names. That's where I was going next. Bill Walsh does not become head coach of the Bengals, and everybody wonders what could have been, what should have been. Bill Tiger Johnson gets a job. God bless him. But Bill Walsh is Bill Walsh. Why was he not the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals after Paul Brown?
To my understanding, and I've heard it from many sources, so I tend to believe it, it's a very simple thing. Paul Brown, a man of his word. Paul Brown told Tiger Johnson was going to be the next head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals. He really respected Tiger as a line coach, and he basically gave him his word. And he knew that Bill Johnson was special, but he felt like Tiger was special as well. And the first year that Tiger got the job as head coach, we went 10-4 and didn't make the playoffs even with a 10-4 record. And then Kenny Anderson broke his hand on a helmet in training camp, and he tries to play, but he can't. And we go 0-5 to start the season in Tiger's second year, and then it just kind of fell apart from there. It was unfortunate because if Kenny didn't get hurt, first year's 10-4, who knows where we go if he's not injured. So that's life in the National Football League, though. But as we all know, Paul Brown was right. Bill Walsh was special. Bill Walsh had an unbelievable mind for football. He was a creative offensive genius. There is no two ways about that. And when you put Bill Walsh and Joe Montana together, man, that's like, peanut butter's good, jelly's good, but peanut butter and jelly together, now you got something cooking, man.
Your second year, you become a full-time starter. You mentioned you get to the playoffs. You lose to the Raiders 31-28, Kenny Stabler and that whole crew. Then shortly thereafter, in comes a guy named Forrest Gregg. Again, I reflect back to the days of not having the internet, not having information readily available. How much did you know about Forrest Gregg? And what was that first meeting like when he walked in the door? Yeah,
that's another one that's interesting. I mean, I did, being a big fan of the game, the Green Bay Packers were on all the time, and they were such a great team and such a dynamite powerhouse under Vince Lombardi. I knew everybody on the Green Bay Packers, including Forrest Gregg. And I do remember hearing Vince Lombardi say that Forrest Gregg was the best football player he ever coached. And he had some pretty good ones, with Bart Starr and Jimmy Taylor and Paul
Mooney. He did.
All these guys, it's like, Forrest Gregg's the best football player he ever coached. Wow, that's a big statement. So I knew a little bit about Forrest Gregg, but I didn't know, as much as I was going to find out, obviously, about Forrest Gregg. And the one thing about Forrest Gregg, Vince Lombardi pushed the Packers. the famous Green Bay up downs. You run in place and you hit the ground in full equipment. You hit on your belly and you pop back up, you run in place. And they are just tiring, man. And you do like 30 of them and then take a break for 5 seconds. And you got to do like 30 more and take another break for 5 seconds. And then you got to run around the field. And Forrest Gregg, he did what Vince Lombardi did. But there was it started in the first meeting when Forrest Gregg got up. In my mind, I'm sitting there in the first team meeting and I'm looking at this man who's got a very imposing physical presence. And he walks up to the podium, puts his hands on the podium, and he's got Super Bowl rings on each finger, each hand. He's got multiple rings. I'm like, I think I'm going to listen to this dude. I think he knows what he might be talking about. He played for Lombardi, and obviously he was a taskmaster. He really pushed us hard. He really, as Paul Brown's philosophy was, don't kill players. Forrest was get after the players. Right. Paul Brown probably extended my career a little bit, and then Forrest took those years away, man. But you know what? The thing is, he had instantaneous credibility because I knew, and I talked to teammates. I'm like, yeah, man, this is tough, but he did that and more. Can you imagine what Vince Lombardi made these guys do? Yeah. He's probably he's not making us do anything more than he didn't do. So in my mind, he's got cred because he did it. And he won championships in doing it. He believes in it. I'm doing it. What the hell?
You get to the Super Bowl, and look, at the end of the day, you're entrenched now as a starter. And the easiest thing in the world, and I was thinking about this on how to ask you this because I always find it so interesting, and I'll reference baseball as an example. And you'll talk to guys that were playing for the Reds before Joe Morgan got there. And how, he was a guy. Yeah, he was the best player, back-to-back MVP. So it's easy to say, well, he's a guy. But, from just a presence, a toughness, a drive, all those kinds of things, that Bengals team that got to the Super Bowl. Now, Kenny Anderson was a league MVP. Munoz comes in, instant star in the league, et cetera, et cetera. You're on the line with him for a decade, or nearly a decade. But was there a player or two that maybe the rest of us wouldn't say, oh, okay, that had a lot to do with those teams getting over that proverbial hump to get the franchise to a Super Bowl for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. You hit on a guy that was massive, and that's Anthony Munoz. You bring a perennial Pro Bowler to the mix up front, it's such a different ball game. It's like, okay, he's the eraser. He's got his guy. Okay, who's got the toughest matchup otherwise? And we'll slide the line and we'll double. We'll figure out ways to take it. He just made the equation so much easier. And then Max Montoya was a hell of a player at the guard position. We had a good offensive line. Max Montoya was phenomenal. I mean, as good a pass blocker as you're going to see in the NFL, and he could pull and block these little defensive backs who were trying to juke him, and he could change direction in space. I mean, just a great athlete. So we were pretty good up front, and that was a big difference because Kenny was a great player, obviously, but now that we had ways to protect him and ways to run the football with Big Pete Johnson, but a guy that was the X factor in my mind, we had Isaac Curtis and Chris Collinsworth on the outside, and they would, teams wouldn't double both of them, and if they did, my X factor would kill him, Danny Ross. Mm-hmm. Danny Ross, in the middle of the football field, was unbelievable, man. The dude was like Gumby. He was so flexible. He'd take hits and, just kind of like bend around and get up. It's like, how the hell does he get up from that hit and never drop the football? I mean, he was just unbelievable target at the tight end position. Over 70 catches. This is back in 81 for a tight end to have 70 catches, and just he killed people. So now it's like, man, you got two receivers. You got Steve Kreider as the third receiver. You got Danny Ross. What the hell? And you go two tight end package. You got ML Harris. So I think that, Kenny's level of play got to where it should be because he had a line that could work for him and skill guys he could get it to, and he won MVP. On the other side of the football, it's Crumry, man. Tim Crumry, right over that ball, just wearing you out. And I remember his rookie year was my 8th year in the league. I ended up playing 10 in the NFL and 2 in the USFL. And so I'm like, man, Friday is supposed to be half speed, 2-minute drill and stuff. There's no half speed with Tim Crumry. It's like, he's coming, man. It's like a game. And I'm like, Timmy, man, I'm 30 years old, bro. I need to have my Friday. Doesn't take a lot out of me because I got to play 2 days later Sunday. Well, why don't you quit then? If you can't handle this, just get out of the game. What the hell? This is the way I do it. I don't go half speed. This is how I play. I'm like, I got it. So we played 200 games that year, going every Friday with Tim Crumry. It was crazy, but he just raised the level of the defensive football team. Man, that dude was, he was, before he shattered that leg. And even afterwards, for him to play after having the injury that he had to a leg that got gnarled up like that, him to come back and play and not miss any games, that's crazy stuff. That's legendary stuff. So I'd say defensively, that addition was massive as well.
All right, so you talked about leaving the Bengals, and all of a sudden you meet this guy, and you've been asked this 1,000 times, because, of course, he later becomes president of the United States and Donald Trump.
Right.
He's wheeling and dealing in real estate. He's buying a team in the USFL, the New Jersey Generals. I don't even know where to start. When you met him, what was it like? What was it like then after being around him? How much were you around him? You know where I'm going here. What was it like?
Yeah, it was. He was unbelievable. At that point, he's only in his 30s, late 30s. And he was a dynamo. Just a human dynamo, I think is the best way to put it. And Jim Valek, the general manager for the Generals, reached out to me about, would I want to come and meet with the New Jersey Generals. What they did was NFL players, by geography, you had territorial rights to players in the NFL by where your team was located. So the Generals being in New Jersey, Syracuse was their territorial right for NFL players. So he's like, we'd like to, meet, talk. And so I go to New Jersey, New York City metropolitan area, and Donald Trump in the Trump Tower. Just recently completed Trump Tower, the top floor of the Trump Tower. And man, it's like just as big. The whole top floor is Donald's office, and he's got all kinds of pictures, a lot of pictures of himself. Donald likes Donald, there's no doubt about it. And very accomplished guy. And really, very engaging guy, and what they ended up doing, which was unheard of in 1984, they said, okay, we're gonna offer you a contract. And this is where the information that's out there about this 10-year guaranteed contract is inaccurate. It was a 2-year guaranteed contract. He gave me what he said, I'm going to do a personal services contract. And that personal services contract means that I'm going to guarantee your salary and bonus and everything, whatever there is structurally in the contract, for 2 years. Whether you get hurt, whether you get cut, whether it's injury, lack of performance, whatever it is, you're getting paid for 2 years. And I'm like, wow, okay, well, I played 10 years, 32 years old. Man, it's like a 10-year annuity coming due, It's like, man, guaranteed 2 years of a contract. So I did it. I said, we got ourselves a deal and played for the Generals. And I'll tell you, Thom, playing in the NFL in the 1983 season, a full season, taking every snap basically, and having 2 weeks off, and then going to training camp in January down in Central Florida University as with the New Jersey Generals, and no break. And then I had an offensive line coach by the name of Bill Austin. And Bill Austin was an offensive line coach for Vince Lombardi. When Vince Lombardi was with the Washington Redskins, Billy Austin, BA, was his line coach. So you know where I'm going. There were no days off. There were no snaps off. That back-to-back season, 83 NFL season, 84 USFL season, I played. Let's see, it was a full season. Was the USFL played 18 games, so it was. And then there was preseason, 2 preseason games. So it was 20. It was 40. Then postseason. It's like 42 games in 9 months.
Wow.
And no break. I was coming home, rigor mortis, man. I was like, oh, I can't move. I mean, I'm laying on the couch watching some TV and I can't get up. It's like, wow, that was brutal physically. There was no question about it. In hindsight, I didn't realize how tough that was going to be, but it was compounded by the fact that I had an O-line coach that there are no veteran days. There are no days off. You don't practice, you don't play, dude. That's the bottom line.
Did you ever spend any more time or through the years later with Trump?
No, not really. He was very hands-on as an owner, Thom. I mean, he would be out there at practices. The great thing was, like, if we played the Jacksonville team, he would fly his, personal Trump helicopter down there and land right by the stadium, and the people would be like, "What's going on here? What is this? Is this the FBI? What's going on?" And out would get Donald Trump and just come into the stadium with a grand entrance. He was something else. He was he's such a forward thinker. Tremendous idea guy. Very, 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 very interesting man. So here recently I have not. And once he got into the political end of things, no, I didn't.
Yeah.
But I wasn't surprised. Listening to him and watching him, how he handled people and situations and everything, not surprised whatsoever that he got into politics and ended up being president of the United States. There was no shocker there.
You get into broadcasting, and you get a chance with the team you starred for. I mean, you're on the 40th anniversary team, the whole 9 yards, as one of the great offensive linemen, great players in the history of the Bengals. You get into broadcasting, and look, anybody who thinks that walking off the field and walking into the booth is like some easy thing just because you played is simply not the case. I mean, it's taken you a while to get to where you are. Now, you had a lot of success early on in broadcasting, not only with the Bengals, but I mentioned earlier with NBC, with the Big 12 for years and years and years. But that's a tougher transition, I think, than a lot of the general population believes it is. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, there's always a transition. And right away when I was done playing, I was thinking about coaching. I knew I wanted to stay in football. So I remember Tiger Johnson, when I made it as a rookie, way back in 1974, like you said, I was the 61st pick, third-round guy. In today's draft, it would have been a late 61st pick. I was all pumped up. This is great, man. Oh, man, Cincinnati Bengals. And then Paul Brown. And back to your other question about Paul Brown, my grandfather said, "Son, you're going to be playing potentially for Paul Brown. Do you realize how fortunate you are, son? Come on, man." I'm like, okay, here we go. And then I made it. And it came down to the last cut. I was a third-round pick, and they drafted another guard out of Nebraska in the 4th round, and it was a battle royale, man. And one was going to make it, and one didn't. One wasn't. And he got traded to Green Bay, and I made it. And then Tigers, "Hey, congratulations. Do this as long as you can, son." Let me tell you something. There's nothing in the world like this. There's no other job out there that has this kind of relationship with other people, other than the military. He said, I'll probably give the military, but he said the esprit de corps, all this stuff, it's different. It's different than any other job. And do it as long as you can. So I thought, on Tiger's advice, maybe I'll try to stay in the game. And I was thinking about coaching, and Forrest Gregg was interested in talking about going up there to Green Bay. He was at Green Bay at the time, maybe working with the offensive line up there. And so I'm like, And so my wife Lynn's like, "Well, enjoy Green Bay. I ain't going." Well, that was the end of that one. So it's like, I don't really necessarily want to move the kids to Green Bay in that weather and all that kind of deal. But honestly, big factor was what's the best decision for the family? Because we had children young and had kids that were already in school, two kids, a boy and a girl, and I'm like, and they love Cincinnati. and they had a bunch of friends. So I wanted to try to keep that as intact as possible. So the broadcast and arena was, was another option because you could still stay involved with the game and maybe do other things if you need to. But that could be a staple where you continue your association with the game that you love. And here it is, 37 years later, still doing the games with the Cincinnati Bengals.
I want to ask you about a couple of issues in the game today before we get to the Bengals. A lot of debate here over the last 3-4 weeks about this roughing the passer thing, about the concussion protocol thing. And a lot of people are weighing in on it, one way, the other way, so on and so forth. I remember I used to get really upset with people a few years ago, Bob Costas being one. And Bob and I have talked about this topic just, on private conversations many, many times about how I think it's easy for the quote-unquote suburban moms and dads to talk about the ills of football and all this kind of thing, right? But if you're fortunate enough like we are, and you start traveling around and you hear the stories of where so many of these kids come from, whether it's rural America out in Wisconsin, an offensive lineman, whether it's the inner city kid in Miami, oftentimes it's the only way out. I don't need some suburban mom from Anderson Township telling me whether or not my kid should play football, okay? There are dangers to the game inherent to the sport. It's a violent game played by big, strong, fast men. Are we getting to the point, though, now, Dave, especially the last couple of weeks, some of these roughing the passers call? We saw it in Kansas City the other night. We saw it with Tom Brady the other day in Tampa Bay. Where are we going? Where should we be going with all this?
That's a great question. I mean, and you talk Bob Costas, just a quick aside there. We both graduated from Syracuse together, from the Newhouse School of Communications. He was the star of the Newhouse School of Communications. I'm like, this dude is as good as anybody in the country right now. And he is unbelievable. But that whole dynamic, you're right. The pendulum swings, and when you have something that is so high with social media now, any kind of an injury, it's not just nationally televised. It's like on social media, every form of social media, over and over and everybody weighs in and it blows up. It's viral. So the pendulum can swing, big swings. And right now, what's going on now is a big reaction to the Tua injury. And the Tua injury involving the Cincinnati Bengals, Josh Tupou made a tackle. And honestly, when I thought there might be a flag because I've seen that flag and they called it with Tom Brady when he got slung to the ground a little bit. But I thought the penalty was him kicking up at the lineman after he got slung to the ground because I didn't think it was violent. But the Josh Tupou one, oh boy, is that one, you're not supposed to do it with excessive force. And there was pretty good amount of force there. But like you say, big, strong guys, and he hits his head. But the week before, the Buffalo fiasco was the one where he gets hit. He goes to the ground. He hits his head. He gets up, sits up, shakes his head. And I've done it. I know what that feeling is. Man, there's the bright flash, and everything is like super focused. It's like, oh, where am I? You're in La La Land, and you're trying to shake out of it. And I've had many of those episodes, and not come out of the game. But so he's trying to shake it off. He starts to walk, starts shaking it off again. Linemen are staying around because they know. They've been there. They know what he's doing when he's shaking his head like that. He's shaking out cobwebs. And then he basically loses his balance and almost collapses. And that's not a back injury. Come on, man. So then the very next week, 4 days later, basically, Sunday to Thursday night. So now you have it by definition, a concussion is, your head's traveling to the ground, and now the skull hits the ground, the skull stops, the brain doesn't. The brain keeps going. So inertia takes it right into the skull and bruises your brain. You have a brain injury. You have a bruised brain. You have blood in your brain. And there's different severities to that. But obviously, it was an issue because of his reaction afterwards. 4 days later, he hits the same spot. And once you get a concussion, you're more susceptible and vulnerable to having another one because you're already bruised. Now he's got frozen hands. His eyes are out of focus. His eyes are rolling in his head. They said it was ugly out there. That's why the whole team's out there scared and take him off on a stretcher. So now every mother that's watching that game looks at their 10-year-old kid and says, "You're not playing football anymore." I mean, that's just a tough night for football, contact football. So now the league has said, all right, well, we're going to change concussion protocol. If your motor skills are noticeably inhibited, you're out. You're out the rest of the game. Now you have Teddy Bridgewater gets hit in the first play of the following game, and he's run a little bit. He's done for the game. He passed concussion protocol 4 times. They wouldn't let him back in the game. So, again, the pendulum swings, and so now everything, the hits that you're talking about, the hit on Brady that was flagged, the hit, you have a defensive lineman, Chris Jones makes a great play.
Yep.
Takes the football right out of the quarterback's hands, puts his left arm down to brace to make sure it doesn't fall on top of him full weight. Referee doesn't see that. He sees him fall. He thought on him full weight, throws the flag. So there's the pendulum. It was here, swing it back. You got to find that point that everybody can live with. You got to find that midpoint, and that's going to be, there's going to be all kinds of NFL meetings that go on the rest of the season here and in the off season with the competition committee and all these committees subcommittees that the NFL has, trying to figure out how to keep the game safe, but not overreacting to things.
Okay, overreacting to things. We now get to the current state of the Cincinnati Bengals. Chris Collinsworth was on the show last week, and I know you work for the Bengals. Okay, I used to work for multiple teams in my day broadcasting, whether it was the Cubs, the Diamondbacks, the Reds. They sign your paycheck, and there comes responsibility with that and the people that you work for. So I just want to lay that on the table ahead of time.
Yep.
So as you look at the Bengals, we had Collinsworth last week, and I asked him just a generic question, not in reference to the Bengals, but generically all his years around football. Does he think it's a good idea that the head coach is also the offensive play caller? And look, Sean McVay's a head caller, right? They won the Super Bowl last year. The team that they played in the Super Bowl, Zach Taylor's a play caller, so they got to the Super Bowl. So, look, there's Exhibit A that you can do it. This week, a lot of questions about whether Zach Taylor should continue to call the plays. I said on the show yesterday, there is no way on God's earth he's given up the play calling right now in the current state of the franchise. Is there reason to be concerned about this offense, Dave? Because this is a lot longer stagnation just these first 5 games. It goes back even to the postseason of last year and the last number of regular season games last year as to what they're able to do on offense. Are you concerned about it?
Yes, I am concerned about it. And like you said, Kyle Shanahan's another one, head coach that calls plays. Bill Walsh basically did it. And that, that's obviously, there's reasons for that. One of the greatest play callers ever. But yeah, this year, too many situations where there's been 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, missed executions, low red zone, 1st and goal situations. 12 of those this year. They've only scored 7 touchdowns, and twice have come out with no points. The most famous being 1st and goal at the 2 in this last football game, and run 2 gadget plays in that 4-play sequence where you run the Philly special and you run the shovel pass. What goes on there is when you decide to run a play like that, you're putting all your chips in the middle of the table. Because if it works, people can be, oh, that's brilliant. Gosh, that was the most unexpected. Oh, my God, this guy is better than football God. If it doesn't work, you are a dog. And it's black and white. There's no gray. There's no in between. Bottom line is, part of it is lack of player execution, a big part of it. But I'm old school. 1st and goal at the 2, put your quarterback under center, run the damn football. At least 1 down, maybe 2, if it's going to take you 4 downs. I have a different mindset on those kind of things. But this year to be 1st and goal 12 times and only score a touchdown on 7 of them, it's like 58%. You got to be at least 66 or 70, 2 out of every 3. There's like 26 of the 32 teams that are over 70%. So that they're lagging in that area. That is a big area. And like you said, it's gone back to prior years as well. Look, in my opinion, when you have the skilled people that they have to go in this last game against Baltimore, the first 13 plays of the game netted them 22 yards. They got 11 yards on the first play. So the other 12 plays netted them 11 yards. They go pick up 11 yards and then 3 downs and punt. 3 straight 3-and-outs. You can't do that. Not with the personnel that you've got, on the football team. And it's a combination. It's not just play calling. It's not just lack of execution. It's both. And they're gonna have to try to find a rhythm and timing, and because it's starting to run out of time. You're going to have to get it done, get it righted quickly. You're down. You get 5 games are in the bank, and you're sub 500. And Thom, at this point, if they score first, they're 2-0. If they don't, they're 0-3. You're not going to score first in every football game, but you have to get off to a quicker start in more football games than they have. And so far, it's been 3 times they didn't, 2 times they did. Going to have to change those numbers around a little bit. You're going to have to get off to a faster start more frequently. It's not going to happen every game. That's impossible. But you're going to have to do it a lot better than half the time.
The offensive line. They go out and they spend a bunch of money. I give the organization all the credit in the world for doing what they did during this offseason and bringing in these veteran guys who have been around for a while, won Super Bowls, been to playoff games, et cetera, et cetera. I was highly critical of the team. You might emphatically disagree. I was highly critical of that group, and it's just based on conversations I've had through the years with guys like you and Anthony Munoz and 100 other offensive linemen or coaches that tell me the most important group on the field, positional group, to have communication and working together and working in harmony together is the offensive line. I was highly critical of them not playing those guys at all during the preseason. I understand the flip side, don't want to get them hurt, but I just thought with a new group and only one guy back as a starter, it was important. The first 2 games were a disaster. Do you see improvement of that group the last couple of games and moving forward?
I do see improvement, and I think a lot of it is based on who you're playing. The first 2 weeks, they faced the Defensive Player of the Year in T.J. Watt, who is a game wrecker, and he wrecked that game on that side of the football. He hasn't played since. The Steelers are 0-7 when he doesn't play in his career. He's that important. And then the following week, Micah Parsons was Defensive Rookie of the Year and runner-up to Defensive Player of the Year to T.J. Watt, and he wrecked that game as well. They haven't played that kind of a guy in the defensive front, and they handle things a lot better. So sometimes it's the opposition that you're playing against. But I'm with you. I'm old school. I know I am. But, man, you have to go full speed with the guy next to you to understand, okay, when that ET stunt happens, what level is he going to be setting on? I got to make sure I'm on that same level so we can zone block and pass that stunt off. And until you experience it full speed, I mean, it's now you're kind of guessing, and time on task. It's a time on task thing. It's repetition breeds comfort level. And the first couple of games, I made the comment a couple of times. This is like training camp for these guys now. These are preseason games. They're going to be better in week 2 than they were in week 1. They're going to be better at the end of September than they were at the beginning of September here. And it's just for that reason. Repetition breeds comfort level. So they're going to continue to improve in that regard. Now, they have miles to go before they rest, but they thought, the Rams and the Bengals thought, when we practice against each other for 2 days and we have our periods where it's good contact in the offensive and defensive line, it's just thump drill, we're not going to tackle and take people to the ground. That should be equivalent to what we're getting in the preseason. It didn't work out because the Bengals and the Rams offensive lines were issues to start the season for both teams. So, like you said, they were both in the Super Bowl last year with the mindset of don't beat guys up, make sure availability is the best ability in the National Football League. Make sure these guys can go out in the field for you every single game or as many games as possible. But there is something to getting things timed up, getting synchronized, getting in rhythm, no question.
Lap, we love listening to you, man. Every single week, you are just the best. I mean, behind the microphone and just hanging out and spending time with you is always very, very special. We wish you all the best, man, and we thank you sincerely, very, very much for your time today.
Thom, I enjoyed it immensely, and I enjoyed doing football games with you.
Yeah,
you're a true professional in every sense of the word, and thanks for the opportunity to visit with you. It was a lot of fun, my man.
Amen, brother. Dave Lapham, one of the all-time greats. He's the Joe Nuxall of football in this town. And there's no higher compliment you can give, in my opinion, to another human being. I mean, Dave Lapham is he is Cincinnati football. I love that guy. He mentioned we had a chance to do some college stuff together many years ago. His son came in, did the spotting for us in there. He was young. I think he was still playing. He might have been in high school at Moeller. He went on to play football at can't remember if it was football or baseball that he played at Miami. I'm drawing a blank on that. But I mean, and his daughter Sarah. I mean, what a guy. He is just an awesome dude and really good at his job and fun to be around. And we're so appreciative and thankful for his time today.